Hello and welcome to Showband Heroes, where we get to meet the men and women who created the most successful live music era in Irish history, and who entertained us throughout the 60s and 70s and kept us dancing with each other, even through our darker days. My guest today is Gerry Madigan. And Gerry, you're very welcome to Showband Heroes. Did you ever think when you started out as a duo, I think you were a duo with Brian Dowling, that you'd ever become one of the great legendary figures in country music, Irish country music, both at home and abroad, especially in the UK and in Europe?
Not in a million years, Stephen. we were playing for fun, and we just enjoyed the camaraderie within that folk scene, because the folk scene was booming at that time. That was the late 60s. You know, you had people like Paul Brady and the Johnstons and Dubliners, and of course a huge number of folk clubs, like the Old Triangle Folk Club, the Universal Folk Club, the Black Raven. There was a folk club going almost every night of the week, and we enjoyed it. It was just fun. It was terrific fun. And then we met Sean McAviney. He played a washboard, and his brother-in-law played fiddle, who subsequently became the dancing fiddler. But they joined us, and we enjoyed a great time on that circuit. It was all fun. You know, we were earning hundreds of dollars. Like, you know, it was a great relief after the working week to go out and play on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and earn the same money as you earned for the whole week and working in an office, you know. But we never thought of going professional or anything like that. And then we got a spot on the Late Late Show, and Brian Malloy of the Tom Costello organization approached us, and he said, why not form a 7-piece band and go on the dance hall circuit? And I didn't even know the dance hall circuit existed. I mean, as far as I was concerned, my world was around the folk scene and the folk clubs and the concerts and things. And I thought of, well, what would that entail? And he said, well, we get a few, you know, professional musicians who are electric guitarist and a drummer and a bass player and all that. So we got a few really fantastic players. Brian Harris, the lead guitarist, he was with the Creatures, who could have been a huge band if they'd had the right opportunity. They went to the States. Tommy Kinsler was from the Orange Machine. Eventually, we got Buddy Bolan from the Uptown Band. These were guys who had been playing successfully on the beat club sort of circuit, and we started on the 20th of May in 1969 at the Crystal Ballroom, and we hadn't a clue what we were doing. It was a whole different ball game. You know, it was a dance hall full of people dancing, and we were providing the music, and we'd never experienced that before. But we learned very quickly, and then we went on the circuit. We were playing it in carnivals and playing at all the dance halls and the clubs. And we were lucky because fairly early on, like we started in May, and by September we were drawing big crowds, and that doesn't happen for most bands. You know, as they say, you have to eat the beans for a few years. Well, we felt we were eating the beans on the folk scene, and then we got onto the scene. And one of the things about the band at that time, especially the country bands, they would stand on stage and perform, but they weren't very energetic or lively. So from an entertainment value perspective, it was very good, and it garnered a lot of attention, and we started to break attendance records, and then we went to England and did a lot of other stuff. But that was the beginning.
And you went from the Cotton Mill Girls to the Cotton Mill Boys. How did that happen?
Cotton Mill Girls.
Was there a record or something out at the time, some Appalachian record or something like that?
That's right. That's right. Well, that's funny because it was when Brian Dowling and myself, we were just a duo, and we used to play regularly in the 95 Club in Harker Street. It was a folk club run by a guy called Cecil Frew, and we were going in to the club one night, and there was Paul Brady and Mick Maloney from the Johnsons. And we always sang this song called Cotton Mill Girls. It's an old Southern song. And and Paul says to Mick, "Oh, here come the Cotton Mill Boys." And the name stuck. It was one of those things, you know, like a slang word or something, but it stuck. And we kept that. And then one of whoever was introducing us that night, he introduced us as the Cotton Mill Boys. We'd never been introduced as that before. And the name stuck, and we used it ever since. It was, it's funny. It's funny where names come from or how you develop a name.
And I'm very interested in the fact that when you recruited the electric players, Brian Harris has always been one of my favorite guitarists. But you're right, he came from the Creatures, and you're absolutely right. They could have been huge. That Turn Out the Light, it was an amazing record that they had. But Brian and Tommy Kinsella, who had played with Robin Crowley in the Orange Machine, I mean, they weren't exactly country players. And how did that fit in? Or did this new influence, along with yourselves, did that make it work?
Well, it was very interesting. I remember we had a session just a few weeks into the band, just a casual music session, and I was playing a lot of the folk stuff. And Tommy Kinsella suddenly took a huge interest in the folky, the country folk sort of aspect, and we did a lot of bluegrass in those days. And he was fascinated by some of the bluegrass players, because there's a lot of improvisation in bluegrass, which you don't find a lot of in straight country music. And Tommy just took to it like duck to water. He just said, "Wow, this is nice," and he added some lovely syncopation, you know, to the songs. But Brian Harris, like he was a rock guitarist, and a fantastic guitarist. But I remember we were only a few weeks on the road. And just before when we were setting up, we were over in a place called Gort, you know, Gort in Galway. Yeah. And before the gig, I was just messing around on the guitar, and I played Freight Train, you know, Freight Train, the finger picking style. And Brian Harris said, "How do you do that? What fingers are you using there?" And I said, "Well, I'm going back to the hotel." So we went back to the hotel, and we went up to the bedroom, and Brian took out his guitar. He said, I want to see how he said, "That's fabulous, man. That's fabulous." You know, Brian, he's a really cool man. And so in walks Bobby Kelly, because the Sounds were staying in the same hotel. And Bobby Kelly, of course, was a pop and rock guitarist as well. And he was in, and I didn't realize that, but he loved country music. He loved he was into more like the Byrds, Burrito Brothers, and all those sort of things. But so the three of us sat on the bed working out how to play the Freight Train. And after that, if you know, I mean, I keep in touch with Brian and Tommy, and I used to keep in touch with Bobby before he passed, sadly. But I remember Brian wasn't into the finger picking. He used the pick and his two fingers, and he was able to do exactly the same as I was doing with the two fingers and thumb. You know, and it just shows his fluency on the fretboard, but also his dexterity with the right and left hand. He was just amazing. And if you hear him play now, I played them before I left Ireland with Chris Mean and his Redneck Friends. I don't know whether you know that band, but we did quite a few gigs. And he does an instrumental called the Claw, and it's a one of those, you know, finger picking ones. But he does it with flat pick and two fingers, and he just does it to perfection. He's a beautiful player. But yeah, they all got turned on to country music.
Is that the Jerry Reed thing?
It is exactly.
I mean, when you mentioned the Byrds, you know, before anybody thought country was cool, we used to listen to Clarence White. I think it was Clarence White, the fabulous guitarist with the Byrds, who really invented that style, didn't he? Absolutely. Well, you know,
my background was into bluegrass. I love the Dillards and Earl Scruggs and all these, and then this new wave of of banjo players came along, and we've got people like Bela Fleck and Tony Trishka and all these amazing players. But at that time, I got an album called The Gilded Palace of Sin by the Flying Burrito Brothers and Sweethearts of the Rodeo by the Byrds. And I just thought, wow, these guys, this is just beautiful. And I didn't even know what a pedal steel guitar was, Stephen. But I heard this and what is that instrument? And then I checked it out and realized this is a guy called Sneaky Pete Kleino. Mm-hmm. And he was still my favorite pedal steel guitar. He was just amazing. And I thought, that's a pedal steel guitar. So I went down to remember McCullough Piggott's on Suffolk Street, and I forget, Eamon something was his name, the guy. And I said, do you have a pedal steel guitar? And he said, a what? And I said, a pedal steel guitar. Gosh, we don't, but I look it up and see if we can get one. And he got a pedal steel guitar for me. And a few weeks later, he called me and said, I have it, it's here in the shop. And I looked at the pedal steel guitar and I hadn't a clue. I mean, I knew nothing about it. There was no book, there was nothing. And I said, okay, I'll take it. And it was a Rotosound pedal steel guitar. I bought it home, put on all the things, tried to figure out where these rods and everything went. And then it's 10 strings, and I checked the tuning on it. And I just want to see, yes, it seems like there's a sort of a chord there, and sort of, so it's tuned to an E9 chord across. And luckily it was in tune when I took it out of the case, because I had no guidance. I knew nobody who played steel guitar. I didn't know of any books. So I made sure that was it, and I wrote down the tuning, and then I started trying. I brought it along to the band the very first night, and I just jammed on a few numbers, trying to slide up and down. But those two albums turned me on to the whole thing of pedal steel guitar, and then subsequently we had Woodstock, and we had Crosby, Stills and Nash with that classic Teach Your Children. Yeah. And we've got Jerry Garcia plays this just beautiful intro and solo, and oh my goodness, it's incredible. And the other famous one was Buck Owens' Together Again. Remember that one?
I do.
And Tom Brumley played this amazing solo. And years later, we played with Buck Owens, and I was looking forward to play. We played with them in the Opera House in Cork, and I said, "This is great. I'm going to meet Tom Brumley, and we'll maybe have a session afterwards." But of course, Tom had left the band, and a guy called Terry Christopherson was the pedal steel, just as good. But these were some of the classics in pedal steel playing.
I think the first time I ever heard of pedal steel was probably Slim Whitman. That's going back donkey's years now. You mentioned Bela Fleck. I went to see Bela Fleck in America, in Florida, and again he had this. He's obviously an amazing banjo player, and he uses all of the effects and wah-wah pedals and everything like that, and he's very progressive. But he had Victor Wooten on bass, which again, an out-and-out absolute funk player. So that this sort of union, this fusion seems to work, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And how? We were playing in a club called the Mean Fiddler in London back in the early 80s. And the next night we were playing up just outside London. And I got a call from Vince Power, who owned the Mean Fiddler. And he said, what time do you finish your gig at? And I said, we're finished in about half an hour. It's an early gig. And he said, well, then head back here, he said, because there's this guy, Tony Trishka, and you have to hear him. This guy's band is amazing. And Tony Trishka, don't know whether you know Tony Trishka, he's one of the finest banjo players in the world. Himself and Bela Fleck are like neck and neck. And so I went, we traveled down immediately. We were in time for the second half. And this band came on stage, Stephen, and it was Bela Fleck, a bass player from heaven, just unbelievable. A girl playing flat picking guitar, a mandolin player, and their first number, it just blew me away. I thought, wow, what an incredible banjo player, but what an amazing bass player! the bass player was just incredible. And then they said, we're going to play a tune here. This is a sort of concerto written by our bass player. Well, to hear a banjo player playing chromatic style and melodic style, swapping riffs with a bass player, in that area, oh my goodness, they were just amazing. And I subsequently did a masterclass with Tony just last year. And I reminded him of that night, and he said, yeah, one of the best nights we ever had in London was the Mean Fiddler. And I said, and I can't remember, he told me then, I said, who was that bass player? I said, I'd never heard anything like that. But you're right. If the musicians are good, they're proficient musicians, and they get into that idiom of music, it's amazing. I mean, the results. I mean, some of the stuff Bela Fleck has done is, oh my goodness, it's just outstanding.
He even had Bela Fleck had Victor Wooten's brother playing a thing called a drum guitar. So, like a drum machine he held in his hand, and he was playing it. So he was he was using all this innovation. When you mentioned the Mean Fiddler, Vince's Place, again, I always think of my friends in Stockton's Wing when they went, like you, from being a folk band, and a great folk band. They recruited people. In fact, they recruited one of my best students, John Walsh, on bass, who was a very funky player, and Fran, of course, on drums. Who's your drummer when you put the electric band together? Because that's all important to dancers, isn't it?
Oh, it's essential. Yeah. We had Paul Kenny. I don't know if you remember Paul. Paul was with the Smoky Mountain Ramblers, George Kay's band.
Yeah.
And he was a lovely, very solid drummer. And he was the first drummer. Sadly, he died within 9 months of, he got heart disease and he died. And then we had a number of great drummers. Gino Beryl, I don't know whether you know Gene Beryl.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and Gino passed away a few years ago as well. It's funny, you join the Cotton Mill Boys and you die. And no, it's sad that so many of the band passed away. But yeah, we had Gino, and we had Pat Waller. Pat Waller is from Dundalk, another lovely drummer.
Yeah, Pat actually played with us in a band called The Crack for a while.
Oh, really? Yeah. Pat's a lovely guy and lovely drummer, just rock solid. In fact, when we in 1979, I formed a bluegrass band with George Kay and Dermot O'Connor. Dermot O'Connor was from Spud. He had the hit "Wind in the Willows," and we formed a little three-piece acoustic band. And then when we went to England, we did a tour of England, so we added bass and drums to it. And Pat was the drummer, and Pat was just for that bluegrass stuff and a lot of the softer acoustic stuff. You just need to be very sensitive, especially good with brushes on drums. And Pat was just perfect fit for that.
So going back to the rise of the Cotton Mill Boys, I mean, the ballrooms, as you said, it must have been a real culture shock to you to go into the ballrooms and see that type of audience and all of the excitement that the Cotton Mill Boys generated.
It was. The biggest crowd we ever played to before that was Johnny McAvoy. Johnny McAvoy had Marcin Durkin #1 hit. And he asked us to open a show. He did a concert tour of Ireland. And that was the biggest exposure we ever had. I remember we played the Adelphi in Dundalk, and at that time it was a 2,000-seater. And we'd never played to anything like that. But we opened the show and we got this applause from the audience. Go, wow, that's cool. We like this. That's good. But when we went on the road, it was a different ballgame. The crowds were huge. And I mean, remember all those clubs in England, the Irish Club, the Galtimore, and all those. These were massive venues and packed to capacity with people. And we enjoyed those years. That was the sort of early 70s. And I can remember doing 21 days on the trot from Christmas night, which was one of the biggest nights of the year, of course. And we did 21 nights, and I don't think we played to less than 2,000 people a night. I mean, there's nothing, you don't have that anymore. the venues there were so many, so big and packed. But something happened in 1977. We were on Opportunity Knocks, and that opened a whole different a circuit, I suppose, for us. But the funny thing was, we went to the audition, because you had to audition for Opportunity Knocks. And when I applied for the audition, I just, so that we get an audition, I said, and we have a dancing fiddler. So I thought that'd catch the eye of, Hughie Green. And we went for the audition in the country club in Portmarnock, just down the road where we both lived. And anyway, we went to the audition, but by the time we got to the audition, Mick had left the band, and we'd recruited Charlie Arkins. Now, Charlie was a fabulous fiddle player. He's international class, but he wasn't a dancing fiddler. But we just ignored that part. So we went for the audition. We did our first number, and they said, "Nice, give us another number," and give the second number. And then Hughie Green says, "So what about this dancing fiddler? I'd like to see the dancing fiddler." And I thought, "Oh, gee, what?" Well, actually, I said, "Yes, he's an exhibition fiddler," because Charlie used to play the Orange Blossom Special behind his back and in between his legs and all. I thought, let's hope this works, because otherwise they say, "Oh, you're a fraud. You were saying you had a dancing fiddler and you haven't." But anyway, Charlie did his stuff. He played behind his back and he took the place down. And Hughie Green said, "Great, you're on the show." And of course, that changed so many things for us, because it gave us an entree to the British country music clubs, which no Irish band was playing, and also the American Air Force bases, which was great.
You took a big risk for an established band to do effectively a talent contest, didn't you?
Well, we did. Well, the funny thing was, I got more comments from managers in the business. I remember Paddy Byrne, who managed the Indians, and who else was it? I'm not sure whether it was Louis Walsh, but the 3 or 4 managers said to me, heard that we were going to audition, and mostly it's who haven't made it or haven't been successful. But we made it. We were a success. But I just wanted to try something different and try and get onto the English circuit, the British side of the English circuit. And I remember them coming up to me saying, "Really, that's very disappointing. I mean, the Cotton Mill Boys, you're established, you've got hit records, and you're doing an audition for a talent show. For goodness sake, my goodness, things must be really bad." And I said, no, it's great. Well, when we won Opportunity Knocks, I had the same managers coming to me saying, "How did you get on to Opportunity Knocks? How did you get that audition?" So, I mean, it's yes, it was a risk, but it paid off. My goodness, I had no idea how big Opportunity Knocks was, even in Ireland. How big it was, the impact it had. Of course, we only had a few channels at that time,
Sure. And when you consider playing the American air bases, I played the American air bases as well back in the day when I think I must have been about 18 with Joe Carroll and a band called The News. And I remember being particularly interested in when you go into the American air bases, they had jukeboxes with their own music on. They introduced us to a lot of the soul music and a lot of the blues music and R&B, original R&B. Did you find that as well, that playing there was a bit of an education as well, playing to the Americans?
Oh yes, and you had a huge variety, Stephen, of like depending on what airbase. We played Lakenheath. I'm sure you remember Lakenheath and Mildenhall. And Lakenheath was a sort of a fighter base, and Mildenhall was the more civilian sort of base. But some of the bases were deep into the blues and R&B. It was, but I remember we were playing in. I can't remember which base it was, but these guys came in and I don't really remember, but some of these basses would have 4 MPs, one on each corner of the dance floor, because if anything goes wrong, they whisk the guys out and they're gone. Like they don't tolerate any messing at all. But because sometimes tensions are high and some of these guys letting off steam, they just lose it. But anyway, we had about 15 or 20 of these guys come in the leather jackets and all the thing. They were like, you know, the easy rider sort of guys, and they sit down at this long table and they wave up at the band, and I turned to Charlie and said, "Oh, we've got to get these requests for all these blues numbers and rock numbers from this crowd, you know, because that's what they look like." And one of the guys comes up towards the stage, and I thought, "Oh, here we go." And I bent down and I said, "How you doing?" And he said, "Hey man, do you play any Foggy Mountain Breakdown?" I said, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, good. Earl Scruggs stuff. We love Earl Scruggs. And he goes back. I turned to Charlie and I said, "Hey, we're safe. They want bluegrass." So we immediately played Foggy Mountain Breakdown, and the guys were just up and going crazy. It's just, you know, talk about judging a book by the cover. We had these pegged. These were rockers, totally. These are not into country, and they turned out to be bluegrass fans. It was so funny. But that's the American basis. You got all sorts of it.
Isn't it strange that Foggy Mountain Breakdown, Flat and Scruggs, was almost a pop song from the Bonnie and Clyde film, wasn't it? So everybody knew that tune, so it was acceptable everywhere. Did that introduce that type of music to a wider audience, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. You know, when we would do we did the concert circuit in England and also the country music clubs, and we had different programs for a lot of the clubs. You'd play a dance set towards the end, because they want to dance, but you'd also do what they call a cabaret set. So you do exhibition sort of numbers, and there were three numbers we always had to do. We always had to do Foggy Mountain Breakdown. You always had to do Dual and Banjos, and we always had to finish off with the Orange Blossom Special, and that was everywhere. I mean, every concert we did in England. Those three numbers had to be on it. They were like the sort of the pop songs of country and bluegrass at the time. But now, you know, when I look at even the folk festivals, Stephen, you know, especially over here, we're playing a festival up in Edmonton called Blueberry. It's one of the biggest bluegrass festivals. But you've got a cross section of the bluegrass, and as they call the newgrass, and you know, the Bale of Flex sort of stuff, Sammy Bush, all these sort of players, and it really is quite a fusion. So some of the players, especially some of the bass players, have their origins in jazz, and they play some just beautiful complementary bass to some of the bluegrass stuff, and also it's come a long way from the 3-chord trick sort of thing. You know, you've got beautiful chord progressions in a lot of the. If you listen to stuff Bela Fleck plays, I mean, he's just got some gorgeous chord progressions in it. So it's sort of it's come a long way since those days. But you know, still, if you every so often if you play a festival, or you play especially in a jam session. If you're a banjo player, they'll ask you to play Dual and Banjos or Foggy Mountain Breakdown. It was just they were huge numbers at the time. Like from the movie Deliverance and from Bonnie and Clyde. It's amazing the impact it had on the music.
So you mentioned there that there was in your set there was the concert type set, and there was also the dance set. When you played in Ireland, it had to be the dance set all the time, didn't it?
Oh, it was. Yeah, I mean, we had. I remember telling this band that I play with at the moment, the Spitzy Post Band, talking about sets and all the rest. And I said, we had a set list for dances, a set list for cabaret, a set list for concerts, but our set list for the dances rarely changed, because we weren't playing. We played the occasional pop song and things, but mainly it was country music and all danceable stuff. Old time waltz, quick step, slow set. So we didn't need to change an awful lot, and we got to the point where we didn't even have a list, didn't have a set list, and we would play for 2 hours right through. And we just each number, one rolled into the next. You know exactly what was happening, and this was great for a drummer. Like he just counts in the next song. But we didn't change. Our set remained the same for dances for years. If some country number becomes a hit, we'd add it to the set. But generally, it was the same set. And I remember listening to Emmylou Harris, and she was playing in the stadium. This is way back in the early 70s with the hot band. She had Glendy Harden on piano and I forget who was steel player. But I remember she was interviewed and she said, "Yeah, well, I this is the band. We practiced for a week and so, and now we're on a European tour for 8 weeks or whatever it was." And it was Gay Byrne, I think, was asking her. He said, "So when do you practice then? You're on the road or anything? I mean, what about getting requests and all that? Is it difficult to keep up with that?" And she said, "I have the set and we never change a number." And he said, "But what about requests?" And she said, "Yep, that's fine. We'll take requests. If it's on the set, we play it. If not, we say, and here's a song requested by so and we sing it." She said, we don't have the time to change a set. We have to give our program has to be delivered, very fast, very professional. She said, "We never change the set. This is the set for this tour, and that's what we do." And I thought, wow, it makes an awful lot of sense.
And talking about European tours, you broke into Europe very successfully, didn't you?
Well, we did. I remember we did one of our last gigs was a festival in Spain, in Torremolinos. And we also did Shape. I don't know whether they did Supreme Headquarters Ballet Personnel in Europe, in Belgium. We made a bit of a mistake. We were, when we won Opportunity Knox, we were on Wembley, the Wembley Country Music Festival at Wembley Arena, and the guy who ran the festival, I can't remember his name now. But he was quite a shrewd operator. But he was bringing Slim Whitman on a tour of Europe, and Slim Whitman apparently had seen us on Opportunity Knox, and he asked Mervyn Khan. Mervyn Khan. Yeah. So Mervyn said, "Yeah, I'll get them to back you." So at this stage, we felt, well, we're not a backing band, We're a mainline band. We didn't want to be backing somebody, but we didn't realize Slim Whitman was absolutely huge in Europe at the time, and so he was coming over so slim. So Mervyn Khan comes to us and said, "Guys, I've got a great tour for you. 6 weeks with Slim Whitman, and you back him for the whole thing." And he told us the price and everything else. And Brian Malloy at the time was saying, "Gosh, that's nice exposure for Europe." And I said, "No, but we're not a backing band." And of course, the old ego, we said, "No, we're not going to back." And so I said, "No, we're not going to do it." And he said, Mervyn Khan said, "Well, then you may lose out on the best new country band in England award." And I said, "What?" They said, "That's the deal." Now he told us we had won the award of the best new country band in England. And sure enough, we refused to do the gig, and we didn't get the award. So somebody else got the award. I think Poacher got the award that year, or one of those. But anyway, it's something we regretted, because actually it was no big deal. We were unknown on Slim Whitman's circuit, and it would have been a huge exposure for us with the band. But you learn of these things,
Around that time, you would have had some great English country bands, progressive country. I think Country Fever, which featured Albert Lee at the time in the late 60s. Were you on the same circuit as them?
Yes, yeah, I met Albert Lee. Well, Albert Lee, they played the Town and Country Club in Dublin. Remember the Town and Country Club? And that was a small venue for them, but they were only up and coming. I remember watching him playing, and I thought, wow, this is some player. I mean, he was just, well, he's one of the best players in the world. He's an incredible player. But yes, we, on the circuit in England. We met so many different types of. I remember we were doing a show for BBC Radio, and we were in the studios in BBC. And what's the name of the guys? Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. They were passing by. They were in the studio next door, and we were just going through a number, and they stopped, and the double panes, and they were just looking in, and then one of the what was his name? I can't remember. But
Ian Jury.
Ian Jury, yes. And he knocked on the door, and I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Hey, could we come in and sit and listen for a while?" What? These guys so far removed. So they came in and sat, and we played a few numbers. Said, "Oh man," they were saying, "Hey, this is cool stuff. This is cool." So then we went up and listened to their stuff was so different. It was so punky, but I was amazed. They loved the country music. They loved the bluegrass stuff. And another time we met Black Sabbath. We pulled into a service station on the M1, and in comes these three big, huge trucks, all the gear, and the roadies come in, and then in comes the band. That's Black Sabbath. And they came over, and one of them comes over and says, "Hey, I saw you guys." And he's seen us an opportunity, and actually said, "Love your stuff. Hey, that's terrific." Really? Yeah. I mean, it's just out of the blue, you think, no, these guys wouldn't have interest. So to me, it's amazing the number of people in different genres, where if you appreciate music and you're a good musician, there's so many different genres of music that you can enjoy. And so now it doesn't amaze me at all. You get people into rocker. I've got a friend, he's into a heavy metal band, but he loves to play bluegrass as well. So it's lovely to see that. Because I hate the diehards who, you can't play that. It's not country music, or no, that's not bluegrass. No, you don't. It's. I think music is music, and the more innovative, the more creative, and the greater that you expand on your musical creativity, the better. It makes you a better musician all around.
Sure. Whether you're Tony Iommi or Albert Lee or Gerry Madigan, it doesn't matter. As you say, good music is good music, and a good musician will always appreciate it.
Yeah.
When again in Ireland, it fascinates me, because I remember seeing you guys yourselves, and it's sometimes very difficult to mention one band, Cottonmill Boys, and not mention the Smoky Mountain Ramblers. There was you sort of caused this amazing revolution on the country scene, and yet you're a huge country band. So dancing is the one thing that connects the audience and the band. And did you think that you had the dancing thing, the tempos? Because there are only a handful of tempos, aren't there? A handful of styles, whether it's jiving, the quick steps, the foxtrots, the waltzes. Did that come naturally to you, and did you just deliberately concentrate on getting these tempos right?
Yeah, well, I think we were lucky. It's interesting you say you mentioned George Kay, because the Smokies had just started off just before us. I knew George before when he came to Ireland. He had a little group called the Mitchell County Ramblers. There was myself and Patsy Whelan and Clive Collins, and I met them in the 95 Club. They just got up on stage. They just arrived from England, and I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. I mean, George is an amazing fiddle player, and then they formed the Smoky Mountain Ramblers. So I knew George pretty well, and in fact, I just did a tour of Ireland in 2017 with George, just myself and George. we did a short tour in Ireland. Lovely musician, lovely all-round musician, but just an incredible fiddle player. But they had started first, and their drummer was Paul Kenny. So he was familiar with, this is the dance tempo. This is what we need. So we worked with Paul, and in bluegrass there's a lot of syncopation, nice syncopation, and it lends itself to a steady beat. So Paul was the sort of the anchor, if you like. But the tunes, I mean, we used to start off with a tune called Ragtime Annie, and it's just a perfect tune for jiving. But it's nicely done with that sort of syncopation. The tune goes, and it, gosh, the people are up on the floor within seconds as soon as you start it. So we had to be careful not to run away with it. We would only use we toned down the bluegrass songs to a dancing tempo. Kind of like you couldn't dance the Foggy Mountain Breakdown, so we would never do those in a dance set. We would keep it to the songs and just take them down a bit. Some of the songs are very fast, very up tempo, but that's no good for dancing. And also the thing is make sure you have good waltz tempos. And of course, a lot of the people hear the fast songs in bluegrass, but there are some beautiful waltz tempo songs in the bluegrass idiom, and so we had plenty of those, and it sort of it appealed to the dancing public. If you don't have the tempo right, you're not going to get the followers. You're not going to get the dancing public, and the dancing public was huge in Ireland. It was just it was the thing to do. I mean, you could every rural town and village in Ireland, Saturday night, Sunday night, they think about dancing.
And you played all over the island of Ireland. You played the north a lot, did you? We did,
and in fact we had to make a decision. Well, it was after that terrible massacre that you experienced. After that, we had second thoughts about whether we'd go back again. It was it was a terrible time. You know what it was like. It was just ferocious. We loved playing the north. We loved the north of Ireland, the northern people. We loved the dances. The atmosphere was great and all, but the terrible troubles that were going on, it was just appalling. It was frightening. One of the most frightening things that in retrospect for me was when I was talking to you in your house and you told me the whole story about the Miami thing. And it struck me that we had passed by that very same spot and had been stopped literally a few days or a week or so before that. And we had been taken out and there were guns pointed at us, and then cars came along. Now, we had no idea what was in their minds, because you remember what it was like. People, you never know who was stopping you. It could be IRA, it could be UDA, it could be, you didn't know who it was, but you stopped. And anyway, they let us go, and we came home, and then of course the horrible thing happened with the Miami, and I thought, wow, my heart nearly stopped when I thought that could have been us, or it could have been anybody, but the danger of playing in the north became a reality. Then we realized, wow, this is terrible. We have to have a second think about it.
And the music was so important to the people there, because, I mean, we call this series Showband Heroes. And the reason we do is because we feel that the even though we didn't know it at the time, bands like yourselves and so many other bands were bringing people together, and sectarianism and all that was being left outside the door, and we were acting as this amazing catalyst. It was it was one of the real tragedies of that the music business really stopped.
Well, when that happened, we obviously had a band meeting, and because we were due to play up north literally the following week, and I said to all the guys, I said, look, this has to be a general consensus of the whole band. I said, we have to agree, either we're going or we don't. So do we go up there again or do we not? The risks now are a lot different. But we got assurances from a lot of the clubs, like there were so many different, like there were Protestants, there were Catholic, there were all sorts, but we played them all. And we found that, yeah, you're bringing people together and you're providing entertainment and all. So we got assurances. We got phone calls from a lot of them that were calling Brian Malloy and saying, listen, don't worry, you're safe. We're going to make sure nothing happens. But we had to weigh it up. And then we thought, if we want to make a difference and we want to keep music as being neutral and not attached to any side, we're from the South. That doesn't mean we're all Catholics. We didn't, that never came into the band, and it never came into playing up north. We would play, as you probably remember yourself, if it was a Protestant club, you played the Queen at the end of the night. It was a Catholic club, you played Our on the Bean at the end of the night. So it was trying to break down this horrible sectarianism that was there. I mean, there were terrible atrocities on both sides. It was just terrible, a terrible time. But we made the decision then, let's go back up north. And we didn't play for a month or so. We didn't go near the north. And then we made the decision. So we told Brian that, yes, book us in, or we'll go back. And the reception we got, Stephen, was just incredible. And the appreciation we got from both sides, just saying, thanks for coming up. It's great. It was a terrible thing that happened to Miami, but thanks for coming up, because without music, where do we let off steam? Where do we just, where can you get any sort of stimulation outside of the horrors of the wars that were going on? And it was good. It was good for us. It was good for the band. It was certainly good for us when we saw the reception we got. It was very heartwarming to see that.
Well done. It was very good for the people as well. You reminded me there earlier on when you mentioned coming down to our house when I lived in Portmarnock, just as you say, beside, quite close to the country club. It was almost like an open house when yourself and maybe the lads from the Memories, Dara Doyle and Peter Reeds and Bobby Kelly and all of the lads. Matt Malloy from the Chieftains lived close by us as well. It was a real congregation there, wasn't it?
Oh yes. Yeah, with so somebody was asking me about what the scene was like in Dublin, and it was a magic scene on every front. There was the folk scene, there was the pop scene, there was the rock scene. I mean, I was good friends with Brush Shields and a lot of the guys who played the Five Club. Remember the Five Club in Harker Street, and again, there's another guy, Brush. He's a great pop player, but he's a lovely mandolin player. He loves country music. I mean, we used to do a lot of sessions together and all. But there were so many musicians, and it was very close knit. I mean, if you were using the studios at all, like you were using Lombard or Ashling or Avon Andrews, you just got to know everybody, and you knew almost everybody in the business. And then when you know the managers, Tommy Hayden's group and all the different stables, as if you like, and also, like, we worked with Tom Costello organization, so we had Johnny McAvoy, with Christy Moore, they were all managed from the same place, and of course you had released records and Hawk Records, and so it was a close-knit community, I found, and a lot of cross-pollination with pop, rock, country, bluegrass, folk. It didn't really matter, and it was enjoyable.
Even on a closer level, there was a lot of cross pollination between. There's a group of bands there, the Cotton Mill Boys, Buckshot, maybe the Hootenannies, and those. You sort of some of your people seemed to jump in and out of these bands.
Yes. Well, it's funny. We had a split. Buddy Boland was our guitarist. Tommy Kinst was the bass player, and Mark McGregor was the drummer. Mark McGregor was from the north, and we did disagreement over something about policy with the band. And I mean, these are the nicest. Buddy was the nicest guy you could meet, and Tommy. I'm still friends with Tommy Kinst. We're very good friends. But we disagreed over something. So they said, well, we leave the band then. And I said, well, okay. And they got Bill Ryan and they started Buckshot. And the weird irony about all of this was they formed Buckshot and they were beginning to have success. But we went and we won Opportunity Knocks and things exploded for us. I remember Tommy after saying that was bad timing for us, because we could have enjoyed it. But yeah, they formed Buckshot, and I know we had like Francie Lenihan went and joined Ray Lynham, the Hillbillies, and who else? Somebody in the Hootenannies, or can't remember that. Well, of course, my ex-wife's Tracy in the Grassroots, Des Wilson was the co-front singer with her, and we stole him from the band, and he joined us. Yeah, but there was a lot of, I mean, everybody knew everybody else on that scene. You knew all the musicians, and I mean, remember the Monday nights in the National were for the country band. Monday night in Television Club was for the pop bands, and go to a Monday night or either of those two places, and you met just about every musician in Dublin was at them,
And also the influence that the Cotton Mill Boys had on the musicians that you recruited from, as we spoke earlier about Brian Harris. I remember him, as you said, he played with Chris Meehan, but I remember him playing with Chris Meehan, and they had a band called Fagash Lil for a short while, and they were introducing. They were a very cool band, although they were playing country. I remember seeing them one night I think it was in the Meeting Place. In fact, I actually did the sound for them, and they were doing a lot of Little Feat and things like that. So the country music scene was evolving, wasn't it? And the audience was evolving, and the whole thing, as we said earlier, was a learning curve for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. Towards the latter end, and I remember just before we folded the band, and I played with Chris Meehan for a while. We did a few tours and things, and that was fun. But towards the end of our time with the Cotton Mill Boys, we were moving into a lot of the more progressive country stuff, like Little Feat and those sort of bands. They were country, but they were sort of aggressive country. It was really nice. It was nice stuff to play, and also it was challenging because it made you work on especially like harmonizing with the lead guitar, and doing complementary bass and things. That they were not. I loved that time. That was the challenge was great. I remember I was at a bluegrass festival a couple of years ago here, and they did what's that tune? It escapes me the name, but it's a fabulous Allman Brothers tune.
Was it Jessica?
Jessica, yes, and this bluegrass band did it. Oh, it was magic. It was just beautiful, like the fiddle, mandolin, and do you remember the parts in like a sort of 3-part harmony on the guitars? And just beautiful to hear that playing on banjo, mandolin, and fiddle. Like it was just amazing. But and there's an awful lot of that around too. These bands they take songs like that, and it's like we did the Buddy Holly song "Raining in My Heart," and done sort of a bluegrass style, and it just adds a whole different dimension to it. Are falling, you know, the Beatles, falling is I falling, you know. These are fabulous songs, and then you can add these lovely arpeggios and things, and on a banjo to it, and it just adds a whole different dimension to it. It's beautiful.
I mean, bands have done that time immemorial. When you look at, say, for instance, the Didon's version of Hey Jude, it's a completely different way of playing. It's still Hey Jude, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, we had 4 Men and a Dog. You know that band,
Artie Midlane, yeah.
Yeah, and they were here. They were here a few years ago, and they did The Shape. Have anybody seen my lady living by the band? And they did it with, you know, with the Celtic instrument. It was just fabulous. It was just like ballroom and all that. You think, hold on, that's a band song, you know, but beautiful. It's beautiful. It's terrific.
Country music has been so important, and it has been the way to break into America for a lot of bands. When you consider the Beatles' early songs were country songs, weren't they? They had that country beat, although they didn't play it like a country band. And when you think of bands like Squeeze, labeled with love, these were country songs.
Yes. And you see where it went then with like the Traveling Wilburys.
Yeah.
You know, that's a direct sort of spawning of where the country music, where the pop rock music meets the country music. I mean, they had George Harrison and Roy Orbison, and you know that mix, and Bob Dylan and all, and playing those, that was, I mean, that was a magic band. That was absolutely just beautiful. I loved it. Loved that band.
Yeah, I remember country bands could play Beatles songs like All My Lovin', and it was still a great jive. So that beat has always, that dancing beat, clap your hands type beat, has always been popular, and it has introduced and brought new audiences together, hasn't it? Absolutely.
It's back to the beat and the rhythm, Stephen. You know, a lot of these songs, like Beatles songs and many other groups, when you hear music and you hear a song and it makes you feel, I want to get up and dance, you know, that's the magic of it. And sometimes you not to knock a band, but sometimes you'll hear a band and it's a terrible thing to say, but you refer to somebody as a confident musician, and by that I mean that it's like the letter of the law instead of the spirit of the law. Where they're playing all the right notes and they're playing on the beat, but there's no rhythm in it. It's you know, it just doesn't have it. And you hear these songs, like you hear those early Beatles songs, and you hear the Traveling Wilburys, one of those, and you just want to get up and dance. They just move along. It reminds me of the Jelly Roll Morton. Was once asked by a lady. She said, "You know, Mr. Jelly Roll, what's this rhythm everybody's talking about?" And Jelly Roll Morton says, "Lady, if you got to ask, you ain't got it."
Yeah, one of my all-time favorite singers, Ella Fitzgerald. I always remember her singing, "It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing," and that is the connection with the audience, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and so you know, I was speaking at a conference down in New Orleans about 7 years ago, and I went down Bourbon Street and I went into this club and there was a band playing there, and I never heard it like the rhythm. The rhythm of the band was absolutely, it was magic. And I thought, well, that's outstanding. You know, you wouldn't get that every night. The next night I was in another part of New Orleans and I heard this music and I went in, there was another club and another band and that same, it was just that rhythm was just magic. It's pulsating, you know, it's incredible. It's beautiful.
and bands that mix rock and country still come. They pop up every so often, and I'm sure it's new to some generation. People like the Charlie Daniels Band and bands like that, just fabulous. I think maybe The Devil Went Down to Georgia is probably something that re-established the fiddle, and people had never heard the fiddle played like that before.
Yeah, that was another one of those songs, Stephen, that we had to include in our concert set. Or in there, we actually recorded a version of The Devil Went Down to Georgia, but it was another one you had to include in because it was a spectacular number, and the run on the piano and the bass, you know, boom, 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 you know, it was dynamic sort of number. It was great.
And there are bands now as well, like the Dave Matthews bands, that they incorporate so many different styles, and it's not out of character for them to incorporate a lot of country songs as well.
Yes, I mean, Dave Matthews is a perfect one to question. His like he does numbers like The Long Black Veil. That's an old folk song, you know, 10 years ago, cold dark night, but he just puts his stamp on it, and it's beautiful. What
I've asked a lot of musicians when we speak to them, it started off the first time I was working with the late great Henry McCullough in the studios. I asked him what if he were to relive one day in his life. What day would he choose? And strange enough, for all the amazing experiences that Henry had, he chose a day in the show band when he was 17. If I were to ask you the same question, you know, if you were to relive one day in your life, what would it be? Musically, I mean.
Well, it's hard to know. It's I suppose. Well, actually, one of the most amazing shows, one of the most stimulating shows for me was when I had formed this group with George Kay and Dermot O'Connor called MASH, and we had Bill Whelan on bass, and we had Pat Waller on drums. And we played a gig down in Clonakilty in Cork. And I can't remember the name of the place. It was a huge cabaret sort of lounge. And it probably held about 400 people, but seated. And we had played a gig there 2 months before that. And then we were back for our return visit. And we were in the dressing room. We came out on stage and we were just, wow, because the whole place was packed and the sides of the wall were all standing room. And there was this buzz, you know, going on, all the noise. And we just walked on stage and we just quickly just checked the tuning. And before we started, then suddenly, whew, you could hear a pin drop. And I thought, wow, this is a nice audience, because obviously they'd come back after the last time. And we played our first number, and the applause we got from it was probably the most enthusiastic I've ever had. Now, we got applause at Wembley, we got applause at the estate, but this was an intimate, packed house, and every single song, you could hear a pin drop as we introduced it. We introduced the song and then we played it, because we played a whole cross section. It wasn't strictly bluegrass and old time country and all, but that was the most rewarding and stimulating show that I ever played. It was just, and you can't buy that, Stephen. You know what it's just there's something magic about it, and then just chatting with the audience afterwards, it just makes the hard work all worthwhile. You know, the travel and the practice and all those sort of things. And then when you get when you get a reception like that and you get appreciation, you know, and especially it was like a lot of the bluegrass clubs, you know, we switch breaks. So I take a break and you finish the break and you get applause from the audience. And then George takes a break and the audience applauds. And that is magic. It's just the adrenaline. Just somebody once told me, you know, asked me, what's it like to playing every night? You not get tired of the thing? And I said, well, there are two things. I said, you walk on, you set up the gear is the first thing, you know, and the smell of the leads, the smell of the leads and the amps, that smell, there's something about it. And I said, and then you play your first number and you know it's going to be a great night from your first number. You'll know if it was great. And the same thing happens in dances, you know, once you start it, and then they start cheering on the crowd. The adulation of the crowd, to me, it's like an adrenaline shot. It was it's just amazing. But that was the nicest one, because there were a few things about it. First of all, like George was an outstanding musician, Dermot was an outstanding musician, and it was challenging because you swapped riffs and you did counterpoint harmonies and things. That was beautiful. The vocal harmonies, these were all things that you work on, you practice, you get it, and you get the intonations and everything right. And to see that received well by the audience is just, wow. The gratification is, it's incredible. Beautiful.
That's a beautiful memory. I remember one night being in the Olympic ballroom in Dublin, and I was up on the balcony talking to the great Jim Farley, and we were looking down. Big Tom was playing that night, and the power of these lads on stage and this packed audience, everybody was moving in perfect sync. They had this magic thing, this invisible connection with the audience. It is a powerful thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, I was thinking, somebody was asking me recently with this bluegrass band I play with, and say, you know, well, how would they appreciate the music if there's so many people in the hall? And I remember playing. I'm sure you played it many times. Desert Martin. Remember Desert Martin? What was his name? Father Chesney ran the carnival and the hall in Desert Martin. And we came on stage there one night, and you had this, the relief band was on, and they played for an hour or something, and then we came on stage, and I just looked. I thought, nobody's going to be able to dance here at all. Like they were packed like sardines. The hall was absolutely packed. There's no room for dancing. I thought, how's this going to work? Are the audience going to, just jump up and down on the spot? And we started off. The audience cheers, and then we started into the first number. But sure enough, they were dancing like this, and they were still jiving and all, and they were packed like sardines. But they loved it, and it was like that all night. It was just people, so many people in it. And I was telling the guys, I said, but that's what they did. That was their night out. They love this. They love the packed hall and the energy of the band. It's and hot, sweaty. It's that's the way it is.
I remember Michael Byrne telling me that you had an amazing crowd in the Galtymore in London.
Yeah, that was just after Opportunity Knocks, I think. That was I think he told us we did 6,000 people in the place. I don't know how but remember, it was spread into the whole place. There was the main part, and then there was the Cayley part, and there was the other part. And but I remember him coming. He said that's one of the biggest nights we've ever had, and it was a magic night there. Gosh, it was. I mean, it was huge. You remember it. It was a huge venue, and the whole place was just from the minute. Somebody said you play 2 hours nonstop, and I said, yeah, that's the way you do it, but no break. And I said, no break. 3 songs. Thank you very much. Next dance, please. We're on. And you play for 2 hours. And I said, it goes like that. I said it flies. When the people are there, you're getting the response of the audience. And you've got 5,000 or 6,000 people, and they're all bopping to the music. I said, it's magic. There's a magic adrenaline rush from that sort of rapport with the audience.
There is. I think that was the Iron Centre, wasn't it? The new annex that they built onto the old Galtee at the time was huge.
Yeah.
So it's been an amazing journey. You now live in Calgary, is it?
In Calgary, yeah. I've been here since 1999, and so I'm going to stay.
And you still play your music?
I do, yeah. As I said, I retired about 5 years ago, and I got to know a few musicians here, and well, before all the pandemic and everything, we had a jam session once a week, and it's a cross section of musicians. A lot of them are like myself, has-beens. We have been in the music business, but it's nice to play. Just we have a Celtic jazz fusion little group. There's about 8 or 10 of us, and we play a mix of stuff. We play a bit of jazz, a bit of folk, a bit of pop, bit of rock. It's a mixed bag, and that's lovely. And out of that, this band asked me to play banjo with them. It's called the Spitzy Post Band, and it's a bluegrass band. So it's nice to play. We have nice fiddle player, mandolin, and slide guitar and all. So it's lovely to keep your hand in. I regret I gave up the music in the 80s, and I sold my banjo and everything. I never touched an instrument for almost 30 years. And that was a mistake. It was only when I came here to Canada and somebody brought me to a bluegrass festival, and my fingers were itching, and I thought, I have to get back to that. And it's a mistake. If anybody ever asked me, thinking of selling an instrument, I always say, no, don't. Never do that. It was a foolish thing, because even, for me, just to take a break, sit down, play a few tunes on the banjo, or practice a new song or something. To me, it's so stimulating. It's so relaxing. It's just, I'm sure you know it yourself. To play or to play along with a record or something. It's the most stimulating thing in the world.
Gerry Madigan, it's been an amazing journey for you and an amazing journey for me. You've brought me back in time, and I'm sure it's been an amazing journey for all of the people that you influenced. You're a trailblazer, and we thank you for that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.